I sat down to film this video an hour and a half ago. Have I filmed it yet? Clearly not. This is the intro. I've sat here on my phone for an hour and a half, so you know, we all procrastinate. It's fine. Shit happens. Hi, welcome back. Today I want to do one of my classic 10 books I've read recently videos. I really need to find a better way to title these videos because I know that's not very enticing for the YouTube algorithm. But I also don't really like clickbait, but also I need to get more subscribers on this channel, so I don't know. If the title's slightly clickbaity, then that is why. Knowing me, it probably won't be, because thinking of YouTube titles is literally the bane of my existence. I'm terrible at it. I've made my peace with that. But anyway, today I'm going to talk you through 10 books I've read recently, except that's a little bit of a lie, because since I last filmed one of these videos, I've read 17 books. So here's the first 10 of those 17. And then there'll probably be another one of these coming up in literally 2-3 weeks time when I've read the next 3. And then that'll be 20, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'm doing that rambly thing. Let me get out my notes and talk about the first book, which is... Hello. The first book I want to talk about today is Kim Ji-young, born 1982 by Chu Nam-ju. So I actually read this book way before Christmas. My friend lent it to me and I don't have it to show you because I gave it back to my friend. This I gave a solid 3 stars. I thought it was fine. It's not necessarily the best book I've ever read. It's not necessarily the worst. It was very much just fine. But it was really interesting. So this book was a really fascinating concept because it was a fiction book sort of mixed with real life non-fiction data and statistics. And we all know how much I love a good bit of data. I wish I had the book to show you what I'm about to try and explain really badly, but of course I gave it back. So you'd be reading the book and it would give you a bit of data or a real life statistic, and then there'd be a little asterisk, and in the footnotes it would quote, source, what's the word I'm going for there? Can't remember. It would tell you where that sort of statistic was from. Does anybody else really struggle with the word statistic? Every time. I stutter over it every time. So this book, I suppose, is essentially trying to raise awareness of how Korean women stand in Korean society. And I think the message of it is very applicable to societies all over the world. But of course, this is about a Korean woman. It's written by a Korean woman. It is translated to English, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But basically it follows Kim Ji-young's life from a child all the way through to adulthood, where it's clear that I'm trying to remember where the story sort of goes, but basically it opens up and Kim Ji-young is married, she's recently had a child, and she's having some sort of a breakdown, a sort of mental breakdown, because society has just sort of run her down so much as a woman. She has so many expectations placed on her, how she's supposed to act, how she's supposed to be a mother, how she's supposed to have a career, how she's supposed to be a good wife, and she can't live up to any of that stuff. She's living in this really strong patriarchal society with all these expectations of how she's supposed to act. But also at the same time, she's completely dismissed at every single turn. She is a wife, a mother, but she's not a human being in her own right, or at least she doesn't feel like she's treated like a human being. I think whilst overarchingly this book is about being a woman, specifically a millennial woman in a very heavily patriarchal society, I think especially as a millennial woman you have more awareness than maybe previous generations did. Millennials are generally a lot more switched on and they can see the injustices in society, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can do anything about it. Where was I going with that sentence? Oh yeah. Whilst it is about womanhood in general, I think a huge theme that runs throughout the book is the idea of motherhood. And I've written in my notes here, there's lots of references to maternity leave in Korea, which is pretty much non-existent, expectations on mothers, how career and motherhood is completely incompatible, how businesses will try and force you out once they find out you're pregnant, how you've got no chance of going back to work after you've had a kid. It's just really trying hard to push women in society down. And I think at the end of the day, that is how a patriarchal society remains a patriarchal society, because women are downtrodden so much, especially once they have kids. They're sort of reduced to just being mothers. They no longer have a place in the workforce. They don't have any spare money because all their money goes towards daycare. They can't really get any job of any kind. And therefore, how are you going to make a difference when you're sort of hidden away at home with the kids? This is a really powerful read, and I think with the inclusion of the data and statistics, it really does go to show that gender inequality is still a massive thing in places all around the world. I think in sort of Western society, so many people love to say that we don't need feminism anymore, like women have equal rights, they have the vote, as if that's where it ends. But even if you do look at it in that perspective, there's so many places around the world that still do need people fighting for them in a huge way. I mean, I suppose that's the same when it comes to equal rights for the queer community as well. People love to say, like, gay people have rights now, like, they're not discriminated against. But, like, maybe you could argue that could be the case in the UK or, like, in the USA. I don't think that is the case, but people love to argue that it is. But you can't say the same for so many places around the world, and that's what people really tend to forget when it comes to fighting for equality. I'm going off on one of my rants right now, but you know, I love ranting about inequality, apparently. But why did I only give this book 3 stars? I think the writing was very stilted, or I don't know if it was so much the writing, but maybe it was translation. I think there were certain aspects of the book that didn't really translate very well. It was very like staccato writing at some point. It was very sort of hard to get through. I think because the like topic is such a hard topic anyway, like it's not one of the kind of books that you can just binge. And I struggle with books that you can't binge because then I put it down and I don't want to pick it back up again. So whilst I think the overarching message of the book was amazing, I think the book itself wasn't great, and I really don't know whether that was the original writing or the translation. But do I think it's still an important read? Yeah. And with that, we move on to our second book, which is right here. By the way, aren't these colours like really satisfying together? I love how this looks in the background. But anyway, it is right here. It is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring-Blake. I don't need to tell you anymore how much I love the first book in this series, which is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This is the second in the series, Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. Spoiler alert, I didn't quite love it as much as I love Delilah Green. I think I just liked the characters of Delilah and Claire better in the first. But this is still very good. I gave it 4.5 stars. Also, the third book in this series is coming out later this year. That is Iris Parker Doesn't Date, about the third person in the friendship group. I think that's coming out in October, I read. I'm so excited, but it feels like such a long time to wait. Rhubarb loves to join me when I film my videos. Don't you, darling? I think she hears me talking and just wants to be near me. Hi, are you going to purr right into the microphone? Yes, you are. Right, what was I saying? So Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail is about type A, controlling, uptight Astrid Parker, who is Delilah Green's stepsister. And Astrid Parker, as far as she's aware, is a straight woman. But then she meets Jordan Everwood. Do you mind? Astrid's an interior designer. She is tasked with the job of doing a renovation on the local Everwood Inn, and there's like this whole TV show coming in to like do a TV show on this renovation, and the carpenter on the job is the niece, granddaughter maybe, of the owner of the Everwood Inn, Jordan Everwood, obviously. Jordan is a carpenter. Jordan is really hot. I know she's a book character, but just the way she's described is like so my type. And they hate each other at first. This is very much the sort of enemies to lovers kind of trope. And they really don't get on. They're completely opposite personalities. They get off on the really, really wrong foot when Astrid actually spills coffee. No, Jordan spills coffee all down Astrid, and Astrid is not very nice about it. But then they've got to work together in really close proximity. And it's also kind of like a fake dating. No, it's not fake dating. What's the trope I'm trying to get to there? They're hiding their relationship, basically. They're together, but for the sake of the TV show, they pretend to hate each other because it's better. That seems to be what the producers want. So there's all this like underlying sexual tension of them like pretending to hate each other. And of course, everyone's kind of picking up on some vibes, but not really. Also, Astrid isn't out. She has only recently come to realise she's bisexual. I think Ashley Herring-Blake does a really good job of like characterising Astrid as somebody who's sort of realising her sexuality later in life and like justifying that. Not that it needs justifying, but you get what I'm trying to say, like explaining how it could take so long to realise that you're bisexual. This book, I might argue, is even more spicy than Delilah Green Doesn't Care. The sex scenes in this are... They're a lot, but in a very good way. Also, there's a reference at one point to Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellflower, which you wouldn't pick up on unless you've read Written in the Stars, but at one point Astrid like sees the cover on a bookshelf and she like, I can't remember what the context around it is, but it just really made me laugh. It's like the Sapphic multiverse. I thought it was great. If there's one thing that Ashley Herring Blake can do, and she can do it really well, is write chemistry between the characters. Like, the sexual tension jumping off the pages here is just palpable. It was so much. I really enjoyed it. The only reason I gave it sort of 4.5 stars as opposed to 5 stars is Ashley Herring Blake tried really hard to be inclusive in this, and I think that's great. I think you should always be trying to be more inclusive, but it felt very forced at points. It didn't feel like very natural, and that's something which I feel like a lot of writers really struggle with. They struggle to write in all these sort of like inclusive characters from this like whole spectrum of queerness, but it never quite feels natural. Like, I've made this same criticism for a lot of books in the past as well, but sometimes it feels like you're just including these characters, these sort of non-binary characters, or I'm just using non-binary as an example here, and I'm pretty sure the character in this is non-binary, but it feels like they're doing it for like points, not because they necessarily want the characters to be there. I don't know. I feel like every time I say that, I feel like I'm going to get cancelled, and I really hope people get what I'm trying to say. I am so scared of being cancelled on the internet, terrified of it. And then we have a book that I read on my Kindle just before Christmas, and that was It Started With a Kiss by Claire Lydon. I gave this 3.5 stars. This isn't the best sapphic romance you're ever going to read, but it was good. It was silly and stupid, and I did enjoy it. And I'm pretty sure I got it on Kindle Unlimited, but let me just really quickly check that. Yeah, I'm correct. It is free on Unlimited, so if you want to read that, highly recommend. For free, what you got to lose? I know it's not technically free. I know you do pay a subscription for it, but it doesn't count, does it? It feels free. So It Started With a Kiss is about two characters called Sky and Gemma. Sky's recently gone through a really difficult divorce. Her ex-wife is now getting married to somebody else and is choosing to get married at the hotel at which Sky works. So Sky is basically having a bit of a breakdown over all that. And then you've got Gemma, who runs a vineyard in Surrey, Hampshire. Rhubarb, do you mind? Do you mind? Thank you. Then you've got Gemma, who's running a vineyard somewhere near where I live in Berkshire, but not quite. They make lots of references to Reading, which is where I'm from, and I really always enjoy that in a book. Gemma's like way too career driven to settle down. She's also got a lot of like family problems, like childhood trauma, which means that she just doesn't really want a relationship. And the two meet in a bar down where Sky lives. I think she lives like down by the coast, like Devon, Cornwall kind of way. And they get drunk together in this bar, never met before, and they end up making out in the toilets. And both of them are like, this is the best kiss I've ever had in my entire life. But they agree to sort of go their separate ways, and their connection ends there. Only then, Sky decides to move back home to Reading, and she goes into a vineyard one day with a friend for like a wine tasting. And who is the person running the wine tasting? Oh, it's Gemma, of course. And it's great, but that is kind of my biggest issue with the book, because it's just so random. Like, what are the chances of that? Like, that wouldn't happen in real life. And I feel like I was waiting for sort of some explanation as to why Sky had gone there. And there never really was. It was just literally a pure coincidence. And maybe that's just me, but I was like, that's so unbelievable. Like, that doesn't happen. I needed more. And then from there, the rest of the book is very much a will they, won't they kind of situation. Like, they kiss again, then they're like, no, we can't be together. Like, basically, Sky gets a job at the vineyard as, like, social media kind of person, like, marketing person. And Gemma has this rule where she won't date employees or anyone they work with. But it's like, why offer Sky the job then if you know you've got all this chemistry and you can't date her? It's just like, it feels like really weird reasoning throughout the book as to why they can't be together. Like, it's such low stakes reasoning as to why they just refuse to be together and be happy. And eventually, after like 200 to 50 pages of that, it does get a bit boring. But I must admit that, again, the chemistry in this one is off the charts when they actually like each other. There's also really sweet, like, familial relationships. Like, Gemma's really, really close to her sister, and her sister's, like, kids. And it's, like, a really cute sort of family dynamic there, and I really enjoyed that. It's just weak reasoning behind them not being together, which gets really frustrating. Also, I did learn a lot about wine and about vineyards through reading this. Like a lot that I could probably recite back to you, which is fun. I like it when you go into a book not expecting to learn something new and you do. So 3.5 stars. It was cute, not groundbreaking. Which leads us on to another sapphic romance. I kind of went on like a little bit of a sapphic romance run just before Christmas. We have Kiss Her Once From Me by Alison Cochrane. Did I say Kiss Her Once From Me? Kiss Her Once For Me by Alison Cochrane. I gave this one 4 stars at the time. I don't know if I was just like in the Christmas spirit. I don't know if I was feeling really generous, because I don't objectively think this one was necessarily any better than It Started With a Kiss. But this is a sapphic Christmas rom-com that I read over Christmas, and I just really love the atmosphere of that. This one has the fake dating trope in like hordes. This entire book is just like fake dating. If you don't like that trope, this is not the one for you. But I found it like very gripping. I read some reviews of this and people like really hated it, but what can I say? I was Christmassy. It was Christmas spirit. So this book is about a character called Ellie, and the opening chapter is Ellie and Jack spending this like one magical night together, or it's like a snippet of this like magical night they spend together, and then throughout the rest of the book you find out what happens like on the rest of the night. And it's clear they're like very happy together. It's like snowy, they're having a really good time. And then something happens, you don't know as the reader going in, but something happens that causes them to never see each other again, or at least not see each other again for quite a while. Ellie's like an artist, like an animator or cartoon drawer or something, I can't exactly remember. Webcomic designer. Ellie's a webcomic designer who sort of moved to this city, again, I can't remember what the city is, Portland. She moved to Portland for this amazing job and ends up really hating her job, so leaves. So she's found herself working in a coffee shop. She's living in a really shitty little apartment there's mould growing on the walls and it's gross. And then she gets evicted, and Ellie is desperate for money. So one day she's in her coffee shop where she works, and the landlord of the shop walks in, and they end up like going for a drink together after work, and the landlord offers Ellie a proposition and basically says, I need to get married in the next year, and if I do get married, I get all this money. I will give you some of it if you go along with this for me. And Ellie's like, got nothing to lose. I'm not in any relationship. I'm still very hung up on this girl that I spent that one magical night with last year. Why not? Let's do it. So Ellie and Andrew, which is the man. Andrew? Am I making that up? No, Andrew. Yeah, it's in my notes. Andrew. Ellie and Andrew go to Andrew's family's ski chalet for the week to basically meet his family, because like, his family need to be convinced about this relationship as well. Who do you think is Andrew's sister? It's Jacqueline, who Ellie fell in love with like a year ago. So you're in this like isolated ski cabin with Ellie and Andrew and then Jack, and then Jack's best friend who's non-binary, whose name completely escapes me, and then Jack and Andrew's mum and grandmother as well, 2 grandmothers. And it's just like a really wonderful cast of characters. Like, I must say, the non-binary character in this, what is the name? I can't remember. But the non-binary character in this doesn't feel forced. Like, this feels right. I don't know what's different about this, but it didn't feel forced at all as compared to, like, Astrid Parker. I wish I could give you a deeper analysis there, but I simply can't. It just felt right here. So they're all trapped in this like small space. Jack is clearly like very confused as to what's going on. Everyone can see there's like no chemistry whatsoever between Ellie and Andrew. And for some unknown reason, Ellie doesn't tell anyone what's going on. She doesn't tell Andrew what's happening. She doesn't explain the situation to Jack. It's just like a complete lack of any communication. And every single problem in this book could have been fixed if somebody just like spoke to people. But alas, that would make for a very boring book, so yeah. I really love the character of Jack. I found her really, really funny. Like, very rarely do I laugh out loud at books, and I didn't quite laugh out loud at this, but like, I genuinely like smiled and snorted at quite a few points, which I think is quite impressive. And then on the flip side, I find the character of Ellie really annoying. Like, she's just a really, like, drippy character. Like, she had no backbone, never stood up for herself. It really, really annoyed me. And I feel like Alison Cochrane tries to explain away that part of her sort of personality by saying, oh, she's got, like, generalised anxiety disorder. but like I do as well, and that doesn't make you not have a backbone. Like, it just felt like a really weird depiction of somebody with anxiety, but I think maybe I'm just extra critical because I have anxiety, and I know that every person experiences it differently, but it just wasn't a very good representation, I didn't think. So I didn't like the character of Ellie, which sucks because this is told through Ellie's like narrative, but I did like the rest of it. And then we move on to the first book that I read in 2023, the first 5-star review of this book, and the first 5-star review of the year, obviously, because it was the first book I read, and that is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I say read, I actually listened to the audiobook of this, and I'm so glad I did, because Jeanette McCurdy herself is the narrator, and I feel like you really get a lot more layers to this book through like her own expression and through her own emotion, and you can really hear her emotion coming through in the audiobook. One of my big goals for 2023 is to read more non-fiction, but also I don't like reading non-fiction. So I've decided to listen to more audiobooks of non-fiction books, and so far that's going very well for me. This book is just, it feels weird to give it a star rating because like you're rating somebody's life experience, but just in terms of like the way it's written, the way Jeanette McCurdy sort of narrates it, the sort of like the storytelling of it, it deserves 5 stars. Like, and I really do think this like sparked a new love in me for audiobooks. Like I used to listen to a lot when I was researching for my main channel. I'd listen to like non-fiction books about serial killers and like cold cases and stuff like that. But I've never really listened to audiobooks for like pleasure for me. And since I've listened to this, I've been really into them. So thumbs up. So I'm just going to read from my notes here so I don't miss anything. So Jeanette's memoir is about her childhood, her relationship with her mother, her career as a child actor, her time on iCarly, her mother's death and her eating disorder and more. It's this highly emotional and impactful sort of narration or story about being a child actor. Like this book is so honest and so candid, and I can't imagine how hard it is to go on a public platform and share these like intimate details of your life that you probably never really intended to share with anyone. It will break your heart. I actually cried whilst listening to this. Like I loved iCarly as like a tween, as like a young teenager. And growing up, we didn't have like Disney Channel or Nickelodeon or like anything like that until I was probably like 19, 20. And so the only time we'd ever really get a chance to watch iCarly would be when my family went to Florida. We'd go to Florida every like 4 years growing up. And whenever we go to Florida, I would like binge iCarly because it was the only time I'd ever really get to watch it. And I have like really fond memories of that TV show. So like hearing all this stuff that's now come out about it, it's really hard. It's really like difficult to know that behind this thing that I loved so much and behind this thing that so many people loved so much was this like darkness. I've also written in my notes about this, why do we romanticize the dead so much? Like what if sometimes death is really for the best? And that's kind of what Jeanette's getting at with this memoir. The title is I'm Glad My Mum Died. Like everyone views death as such like a negative and dark thing, and it is really difficult, but sometimes what if it's for the best? And it comes with all these like really mixed emotions, because Jeanette clearly had a really complicated relationship with her mother. Like she clearly loved her but also hated her just as much. And I think Jeanette's life is probably better for the fact her mum has died, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's happy about it. It's this like really complicated, tangled web of emotions. It just goes to show how manipulative love can be. Like love is really, really manipulative, even if you don't mean for it to be. Like I'm sure Jeanette's mum thought she was doing the best for her daughter. Like even if objectively she wasn't, clearly somewhere in her head she thought she was doing the best thing for her. Maybe she didn't, I don't know, I'm not Jeanette's mum, but it's just really complicated. Like those familial relationships are really complicated. I just really hope now that Jeanette does whatever makes her happy in life. Like I think she deserves that after all she's gone through. I'd be really intrigued to see if this sort of sparks off a rollout of loads of child star memoirs. I'd be really excited to read more. Excited, probably not the word. Intrigued. I'd be really intrigued to read more. Coming off the back of that, I finally read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I really enjoyed this. People have been telling me to read this for such a long time, and I'm so glad I listened. This I gave a 4 stars. Like, this is a fantastic YA murder mystery. Like, this should be the blueprint as to what YA authors should sort of aspire to when they're writing this kind of genre. It's dark, but not too dark. It's really gripping. It's really intriguing. I read this, I think, in literally like 2 evenings. I couldn't put it down. It's also really, really fast to zoom through because so much of it is sort of told through these like production logs and transcripts of interviews and like newspaper articles and stuff like that. I'm sure somebody commented not long ago saying that sort of style of writing is called epistolary. So according to the dictionary, epistolary means in the form of letters. So I don't know if that applies to this, which is told through like production logs and interviews and stuff like that. But maybe the same vibe applies, I don't really know. The main character here is Pippa Fitz-Amobi, and she's been set a final project for her final year at school in which she's basically got to make a report about something, anything of her choosing. And she decides to take a look into an old, I was about to say cold case, it's not a cold case, an old murder case from her hometown. Andy Bell, who was a teenage schoolgirl, went missing one day and her body was never found, and it was presumed that she'd been murdered. And it was presumed she'd been murdered by her boyfriend, Sal Singh, because Sal was found hung in the forest not long after Andy disappeared. And it was widely presumed that he had hung himself because he felt guilt for killing Andy, and that was kind of it, case closed. But Pippa isn't so sure that's the case, and she is gonna find out. If the actual real killer is out there, she wants to find out who it was, and she wants to bring them to justice. Don't get me wrong, I did actually really enjoy this book. Like I said, I absolutely zoomed through it. But it does send you on some wild goose chases that sort of just lead to nothing. Like, Pippa will follow a lead, and like the author, Holly Jackson, will do a really good job at sort of persuading you as the reader, like, this is it, this is 100% it. And then it turns out to be nothing, which I suppose does happen in real life investigations. But after it happened like 3 times in the same book, you're a bit like, okay, what now? And then you sort of start to distrust everything that Pippa's doing, if that makes sense. Although maybe that's not necessarily a terrible thing, because I guessed what happened or like what characters were involved very, very early on in the story. Like, literally as soon as this character was introduced, I was like, you're dodgy as fuck. And I sort of stayed with that throughout the whole book, but it did sort of make me doubt it a little bit when we were going on these wild goose chases, so maybe that's a good thing. I don't really know, but I genuinely really enjoyed it. It's YA, like, it's not adult, it is YA, and you've got to sort of like look at these things through that lens. And I think if I was a teenager reading this kind of book for the first time, I would be hooked. Like, don't get me wrong, this book is filled to the brim with murder mystery tropes and cliches, but like, that's what makes the genre what it is. What else have I written? It is completely unbelievable. Like, suspend all belief when you read this book. Like, this would never happen in real life. Or maybe it would, we don't know. It is a bit over the top, but it's a murder mystery book, so what can you expect? Okay, let's move on to possibly the worst book I've ever read in my entire life, and that is not even an exaggeration. Like, I genuinely believe this is the worst book I've ever read in my entire life. I gave this 1 star, and that's only because Goodreads won't let me do any lower, and that is Find Me by Andre Assman. So Find Me is the sequel to Call Me By Your Name by Andre Assman, and I love that book. I know some people say it's very problematic, I know there's like an age gap, but if you're taking the book at face value from like just the writing style, it is some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read in my entire life. And I did, at the time I read it, I really enjoyed that book. Knowing what I know now, would I so much? I don't know, but I read it when I read it and I really liked it. And I love the movie as well, I think the movie is amazing. I expected to enjoy the sequel just as much, but sometimes just because people ask you for a sequel, it doesn't mean it should happen. And this is a lesson that all authors can learn from. Just because people want a sequel doesn't mean you should write it. Don't write it. If you can't live up to the characters, don't write it. For those of you who haven't read or haven't seen Call Me By Your Name, it is about the love story between Elio and Oliver. It's about Elio coming to terms kind of with his sexuality, coming to terms with his like first love. It's a really beautiful story set in Elio's family's Italian, I'm sure, like chalet, it's the middle of summer, it's very hot, like it's just a beautiful, slow love story. And then at the end, Elio and Oliver go their separate ways. Oliver's from America, Elio lives in Italy or France, can never remember which one it is. I think they change it between the movie and the book, which is why I get confused. They go their separate ways, and it's sad, but like, it's just a first love, it's like a summer love. When Find Me was announced, I think people thought it was going to be like the happy ending for Elio and Oliver. Only the first half of the book isn't about Elio or Oliver, it's about Sam, Elio's dad. Elio's dad, who's in his like 60s, 70s, like he's coming into like OAP age. The first half, over half of the book, is about him. He's on this train, he meets this woman called Miranda, who's literally half his age, like, and it says that a lot. And there's like a whole thing about how he feels creepy speaking to her because she's half his age, and like all this stuff. And then they end up together, and it's just, it feels so weird. Like the way it's written is so creepy. And I think Andrew Assman, after like dealing with the backlash over like the 6-year age gap between Elio and Oliver in Call Me By Your Name, really decided to double down on that. And you know, you've got to give him props for being so fucking stubborn. He was like, you know what, I'm going to do more age gap. I'm going to do bigger age gap. I'm going to like prove my point that this isn't creepy. But you know what? It is. It was creepy. It was awful. Just the way that Sam was written, like chasing after Miranda, and like the way he described her, it was just very sort of predatory, very like creepy old man. And clearly she like did reciprocate his feelings, so maybe it wasn't that creepy, but also like it read really creepy. It very much read like male author trying to write woman, was the whole vibe here. Like Miranda, I'm sure her name's Miranda, that might not even be her name. Miranda is the only female character in this whole book, and she is there purely as a romantic sexual interest for Samuel. There is a sex scene between them, and you know what? I nearly closed the book there and then. I was nearly done with it, but I really wanted to get to Elio. So Elio isn't even really featured until like halfway through the book, over halfway, when he is also in an age gap relationship with a man who's about 20 years older than him. Why? Of course, Elio is now like in his 30s, so it's not quite as creepy as when he was a teenager, but like, he's just doubling down. It's so strange. Elio's character literally hasn't changed from when he was a teenager to like now in his 30s. Like, you'd think there'd be some sort of character growth, but he's still like very surly, the same as he was in Call Me By Your Name, at which point it was like, he's a teenager, that makes sense for his characterization. When you're in your 30s, it doesn't. He just like uses this man to like get what he wants. There's this weird like mystery they're trying to solve, which feels really out of place. And then the last like few chapters are about Oliver, who's now living, I think, in New York, and he's like thinking about cheating on his wife. And then literally like the last chapter, and I'm going to tell you, if you don't want to hear this, like skip forward like a minute, but don't read this book. Like, honestly, don't read this book. I'm going to tell you what happens. Like the very last chapter, Elio and Oliver are now like together. Like they suddenly meet up, and Oliver's like, I'm going to leave my entire family for you. And they leave, and they end up living in Italy together. And that's it. And it's very out of the blue, very random. Like, there's no like lead up, there's no like sexual tension, there's no like chemistry between them leading up to this moment where they're finally together. It's just like, here's a book about Samuel being a creepy old man. Here's a bit about Elio being the same as when he was a teenager. Here's Oliver wanting to cheat on his wife. Oh, they're together. I hated this book. You know what? I might hate this more than I hated The Power by Naomi Alderman. I did. I hated this more than I hated The Power. So, yeah. This video is literally going to be so long. I'm clearly very chatty today, but I have so many opinions I have to share. The next book is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, and I gave this 4 stars. All my friends, and definitely my girlfriends, will agree with me when I say I have been insufferable since I read this book. Or I should say listened. I listened to this book via audiobook, Audible, and it was like a 9-hour long podcast. Thoroughly enjoy. I really, really enjoyed the audiobook. But this basically looks at gender biases, or like data gaps surrounding gender in our world. because I know I'll get comments if I don't, I do want to preface this review by saying I have since been told, since talking about this book on Instagram, that the author of this book, Caroline Criado Perez, is now a TERF. And I didn't know that going in. I haven't really done much research surrounding that. I am taking people's words at their face value. It really upsets me going online and looking into like TERFs and stuff. I just can't. It angers me too much. So I'm going to review this book at face value for what it is. I'm acknowledging that maybe the author isn't the best, but in terms of the information inside the book, I thought it was really good. But that information is there for you to do with what you please if you choose not to read or listen to this book or purchase this book on the back of knowing that the author is a TERF. Go for it. Would I have purchased this book had I known? Probably not, but it was too late. I'd already bought it, I'd already listened to it. So I've written in my notes that this book is about things that we do know about the world, but nobody really cares enough to fix. It talks about gender biases and data gaps in terms of travel disparities, medical disparities, crash test dummies, Viagra, like all these really, really random things that you would never think sort of has been influenced by the patriarchal society. It has been, and it's really opened my eyes to how everything is sort of lent towards this patriarchal society. I was actually going to do a whole video about this book. I don't know if I will now. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But let me just give you like an example. So we probably all know the crash test dummy thing. The regular crash test dummy that most car companies tend to use, Rhubarb, she's using her scratchy post. The crash test dummy is a male crash test dummy. More women die in car crashes every day than men because cars are not designed for women. Cars are designed to be safe for men. Even like, think about, what are they called? Car seats? No. Seatbelts. What the hell? Think about seatbelts. Like, as a woman, I assume most of the people watching this channel are women according to my demographics. As a woman, have you ever like put on a seatbelt and it just doesn't sit right on your body? Like it sits weirdly on your boobs, it like pulls up here and it hurts your chin, and like, especially like being a woman who's 5'1", like I have nightmares with seatbelts, but I'd never really thought about why that is. It's because cars are designed for men. Cars and seatbelts are designed to sit nicely on male bodies, not on female bodies. Seatbelts are so awkward, like sitting in between my chest. They hurt, like it's really painful, but it's just one of those things that I accepted as being like, oh, that's life. It's not life, that's life for women. Even like the visor in my car, like being a 5'1" woman, has my visor, the sunblock, ever worked for me, ever? No. When it's sunny and I'm driving, we just gotta cross our fingers and hope for the best because I can't see where the fuck I'm going. And like I know I'm a particularly small, petite, short woman at 5'1", but generally women are shorter than men. Why are some visors only there to block the sun from men's eyes? And then another example is like Viagra, the erectile dysfunction drug marketed towards men. There has been study after study proving that Viagra is really effective at helping women with their periods. I can't remember if it's helping with period pain or helping with heavy periods. I think it was period pain. But there's study after study proving that it's really effective in that area. Has any large pharmaceutical company decided to market this or like look into this more for women to help women? No, because they don't think it's profitable, because they don't care. And obviously there is a lot more to it than that, but if you listen to the book, you can hear what I'm saying. There were just so many things, and I'm a lesbian. I was already like veering towards man-hater. I am fully in the man-hating camp now. Not all men, like I know, not all men, I know, but like, we don't know what men, we don't know which men, we don't know. This book is incredibly data heavy, like they're just throwing numbers and facts and statistics at you one after the other, so you do need paying attention. It's a really tough read, it's really heartbreaking, it will induce in you a red hot rage, but it's changed my life. And of course here we're talking about sort of unconscious biases. They're not things that men have purposely set out in the patriarchal society to be like, we're going to disadvantage women at every turn we can have. But when men are the ones in power, men are the ones generally in charge, because of course, overwhelmingly men are still the ones in power. It's getting better, but it's not perfect yet, it's not equal. you're always going to come up against things like this. Like, this is pervasive. It's half of society that's continually ignored when it comes to data, and that is really, really dangerous. However, my major criticism of this book is it's not very intersectional. There are like certain points where she does focus on data from other countries. There's a bit that springs to mind where she's talking about Peru and about India and about the experiences of women there, but generally it is very sort of UK centric and USA centric. Also, there's a lot about Spain as well, but I think the author's surname is Perez, so I think she's Spanish. So it's very much sort of based on what the author knows, which I suppose makes sense because you don't really want to write about things you don't know. But I did go into this expecting it to be a lot more intersectional than it was. It was very much majority focused on white women, I found. At one point it does briefly talk about black women in healthcare in the UK and in America, which I thought was good. I felt like that could have been delved into a lot further, but I suppose you can say that with any book like this. Like, I would have liked it to be more intersectional, but then it would just keep going. I would love a book, another book, like a second half of this, or like somebody else to write a similar book focusing on sort of less white centric sort of data group, if that makes sense. Also, whilst I was listening to it, I was really missing the sort of queer perspective as well. Like, I did wonder if she was going to mention like trans women and non-binary experiences at all. Of course she didn't. If it is true that she is now a TERF, then that very much makes sense. It really got me thinking that I'd really like to write a book one day about the sort of queer experience in this world and the way that queer people are sort of put on the back foot. Maybe not even just queer women, just queer people in general, but I don't know. I'd love to write something like that. Okay, the end of this video is in view now. We've got 2 more books to talk about, and we're going to start with After Love by Tanya Byrne, which I gave a 3.5 stars. After Love is kind of marketed as a YA sapphic romance. I would very much argue with that analysis of it because I don't really think this is much of a sapphic romance as it is a sapphic tragedy. Like, this is like Kill the Gays, but make it the entire book premise. I'm not saying it's kill gays, I'm being over dramatic, but like, the whole premise of this is a lesbian dying. Actually, no, I correct myself. I've written here the lesbian love story you've been dying to read, which is the sort of tagline of this, but I'm 99% certain that the main character of this, Ash, was actually a bisexual woman, so it feels a bit like Bi-Erasure. So this was a lesbian love story, but it's actually about a bisexual woman. This book deals with a lot of death and the afterlife, so trigger warning, if you're in a position in your life where you don't really want to hear about death, then this book is not for you. When I read this, was I in a position to be reading about death? No. I went through like a scare. I had a lump in my arm. I've still got a lump in my armpit, but it's been biopsied. They said it's nothing to worry about, but I was like pretty convinced at the time I read this book that I was dying. Like, so convinced, 100%. You could not convince me otherwise. Like, I had cancer and I was going to die. And I read this book and it sent me into a spiral. It was bad. It was bad, but the book itself was really good and it makes you feel a lot of things. So Ash is the main character here, and the first half of the book is her sort of love story with this girl called Poppy that she meets. The whole book is set in Brighton. Brighton is one of my favourite cities in the world, and you can tell that Tanya Byrne really knows Brighton. I obviously don't live in Brighton, but I do know the city very well because I've spent a lot of time there. And you can really tell that she like knew what she was talking about. And I felt like, I love it when I read a book and I know all the landmarks and I know the roads they're talking about. I really enjoy that. So the first half is Ash and Poppy's love story, and it's really cute, really tender. It's like a little bisexual girl's first relationship with a woman, which was just so cute. And then they kill Ash. She's just dead, out of nowhere, dead. Not a spoiler, that is the premise of the entire book. Only Ash doesn't pass over to the other side. Ash is the last person to die before the new year, which makes her a Grim Reaper. The last person to die in any year, in any like province area, becomes the area's newest Grim Reaper. So Ash becomes sort of like stuck in this sort of like purgatory between life and death. And she's basically got to wander around Brighton reaping people. But it's really hard for her because she wants to see Poppy and she wants to like have that relationship with her, but she can't because she's dead. And will Poppy be able to see her? Like, what's really going on? It is heartbreaking. I really liked the first part of the book. I really loved the love story between Ash and Poppy. I found it really hard after she died. I found there were a lot of plot holes, like the whole like reaping thing, the Grim Reaper thing was never quite explained. Like throughout the book they made like multiple references to like this one person having all the answers. Only this one person knows what's really going on, like who's sending like the bigger orders here. And it's sort of like hinted throughout the book that you're going to find out eventually what's really going on, but you never do, which I found really strange, because otherwise why keep referencing it? Yeah, I found like the death part really strange, a lot of plot holes, but that's why I kind of do struggle with like fantasy kind of stuff, because I always find plot holes. Like I'm very much a realist, so I like books that are set in the real world that I can relate to. When it comes to like anything slightly supernatural, fantasy-ish, I sort of switch off because I'm so good at finding plot holes. This book made me feel very unsettled. I like felt it in my heart, like my heart would literally skip a beat. I cried so much. Is that just a reflection of how I was feeling at the time? Maybe. If you want to feel that way, this book will do a great job at making you feel that way. Just warning, it's rough. And with that, we move on to our final book, which is Solitaire. Talking about books which make you feel a lot of things, Solitaire by Alice Oseman. This will make you feel things. The main character in this book is Tori Spring, who, if you've watched or read Heartstopper, Tori Spring is the older sister. She's the older sister of Charlie Spring. This book is a tough read because you are in the mind of Tori, and Tori is a severely depressed person, like incredibly depressed. And if you are not in a particularly strong mindset yourself, again, I think you will really struggle with this. So Tori's in a really bad place, and then she meets a boy called Michael Holden. And Michael Holden's this sort of like quirky, kooky guy. He like very much just like puts himself out there, and he like forces himself into Tori's life. But it turns out Michael's also got his own demons that he's battling, and it's a very like up and down roller coastery kind of relationship between the two of them, because they kind of like at points drag each other down as much as they bring each other up. And it's a bit, would I say toxic at points? Maybe not toxic, but like I don't think either of them particularly in a place to be together. But also you spend a lot of this book very confused about whether this is like a friendship. Is this like purely a friendship kind of thing? Is this romantic? Is it not? Like it never really clarifies what's going on. Although I must say that I think I read that Alice Oseman was only 17 when they wrote this book, which, is that really impressive? I think so. Although I must say, as a publisher, if I'd like had a 17-year-old person turn over this book to me, I'd been very concerned. Very concerned. So the whole plot of this book is basically centred around this website called Solitaire, which seems to have been set up by a student to take their school down. And Solitaire is sort of like doing pranks, I suppose, but pranks that are getting increasingly more dangerous as time goes on. And it soon becomes clear that their entire goal is just to literally destroy the school. And Tori and Michael go on like a little detective adventure to try and figure out who's behind Solitaire. Like, this book is thoroughly unbelievable. Like, this would literally never happen in real life. But it just felt like this book is thoroughly unbelievable. This would never happen in real life. And I feel like the genre of this book is quite confused. Like, it's not quite YA contemporary. It's got these, like, thrillery elements. But it never quite leans fully into the whole, like, thriller thing. It's, like, a bit spooky and scary at points. But then it, like, pulls away. I feel like it was very confused in terms of, like, where the plot was going. Like, I feel like I either should have really leaned into the mental health thing, or it really should have leaned into the thriller thing, because I feel like the two of them, both aspects were never like fully explored. Also, if I were Tori's parents, I would have got some help. Just saying, like, where are Tori's parents in this book? Like, what are they doing? Like, she's clearly not okay, and yet her parents, nowhere to be seen. And I know, like, even in real life, not all parents, like, help their kids or, like, notice what's going on. But, like, they should have noticed. No spoilers, but they should have seen something was going on. The moral of this book? Love can heal all, I suppose. No, that's not the moral. I don't know. It was fine. It was fine. It's not going to put me off reading other Alice Oseman books. Like, I really do want to read more of their stuff, because Loveless is one of my favourite books of all time. Loveless by Alice Oseman is fucking fantastic. This one just didn't really hit the mark, but I think it is sort of like one of the first ones that were written, so I don't know. That is it. That I've been filming for such a long time. I'm clearly very chatty today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what books you've read recently that you've really enjoyed, that you think I would also enjoy. I will see you in the next one, I suppose. Bye guys.